Hola a tothom. Si us sembla, comencem ara, d'acord? Hello everybody. If it's okay, we're gonna start now. We have more people joining, but we were wait. Can you hear me, Mahmoud?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we're gonna start. We're gonna do the session in English, but there's gonna be some volunteers from Medicat. They already shared the link on the chat where you can follow an instant translation into Spanish. Okay, I see that we have more people joining these moments. We're a little bit late, but so we're gonna start. Well, this is the second session of this series of webinars within the frame of the activist in residence that we've been forced to do online this year due to COVID-19 mobility restrictions. As we explained on Monday, and we remind now, the activist in residence program is a program that we do at SCI. This would be the third session in which we bring here for a whole month activists from different organizations of the MENA region, mainly from Palestine and Sahara. So this year we cannot bring them physically, but we will have them online, virtually. And we're happy to have them, although the conditions are not the best. So I'm really happy to welcome Mahmoud Zawara from Popular Struggle Coordination Committee, our partner, one of our partner organizations in Palestine. Hello, Mahmoud, and welcome.
Hello.
Now I will give him the word, and he has got a presentation, and he's gonna explain us their struggle there in Palestine, and well, different things about their struggle. I just want to take this opportunity to. He was asking for the situation in Sahara. He could not attend the other day because he didn't have the link, but he has. We has it now, or we'll have it soon. We recorded the session, and the other day was an interesting session where we could see the struggle that is having the Sahrawi people right now, and there are some parallels with the situation in Palestine. And as we talked the other day, Israeli government is collaborating with Moroccan government in some stuff, some weapon trading and stuff like that. And as Israeli state, Moroccan state is also a powerful state that are repressing and attempting to human rights of Sahrawi people and Palestinian people. So today we're gonna have the whole session focused in Palestinian struggle, but I'm just saying this because I want to have that you have in mind both conflicts, because in the third session that it's going to take place next Tuesday, we're gonna have like a round table, more open debate in which we can draw connections between the fights and learn from strategies and well, the different ideas and experiences that we can have. So without going further, I give you the word, Mahmoud. I'm gonna put your slides right now. Thank you again for being here. And we're gonna have first like their presentation, and then when he finishes, we're gonna have time for questions and comments from the participants, okay? Thank you, Mahmoud.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, and I am honored to be with you. And Masa al Khair for the people who speaks Arabic. And this session will be in English, and it's my pleasure here to represent the voices of the people in Palestine to shed a light on some topics regarding Palestine, the occupation, the history of the occupation, and what is currently going on, which is in a way or another is connected to other oppressions that, for example, is taking place in Sahara and other Arab regions. So tonight I will start by just raising a simple issue because it will reflect something regarding Palestine, which is, for example, in Spain, if they talk about history, geography, and when they represent the first map on the left-hand side, the full yellow one, I mean, the people will, some people are confused. This is Palestine or this is Israel. And this is a very simple start where which reflects the kind of struggle Palestinians are facing against the Israeli colonial power. Because this map, for some people, this is Palestine, historical Palestine. For others, this is Israel. And mainly in the north, in Europe, they think that this is Israel. And generally, it's not clear where is Palestine, where is Israel. And that is important to shed a light on the history of Palestine. Actually, the struggle of the Palestinians started by the First World War, when the British won the war and they have the mandate over Palestine, and they promised the Jewish people a state. And for many people, Palestine known as the Holy Land, the land of the multi-religions, especially Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. But all of these people were known as Palestinian, whether they were Jewish or Muslims or Christians. They are living the same as living in Catalonia, where your neighbor might be Muslim or Jewish or Christian. You do not care about what is the religion of your neighbor. Thus, this map, the map of 1917, when Balfour promised that there will be a Jewish state for the Jewish people in the Holy Land, in Palestine, it was there at that time. There were no more than 5% of the population were Jewish, and I am saying Jewish Palestinians, that in their mind they are Palestinian. And to bring you back a little bit, like 30 years before 1917, the Zionist movement were established in Europe, and with the aim of establishing a state for the Jewish people somewhere in the globe, maybe Central Africa, maybe Russia, maybe Argentina. So it was like politics. They want to create a state, and behind this also Europe and Spain. The Jewish people were massacred in Spain, and they have a history in Europe that they want to, let's say, find a place for them. Thus, that at that time, the British mandate facilitated the immigration of the Jewish people from Europe to come to Palestine. So the growth of the people of the Jewish people in Palestine start to grow. And I would say at that time, the Zionist movement start to manipulate the Jewish to become Zionists and to believe in the mission of creating a state. That's why the Jewish Palestinians start to be members also of the Zionist movement. And this was used very well by the Zionist movement until 1947. And from 1917 to 1947, Palestine was one of the modernist countries in the Middle East or in the MENA region. So there were many revolutions from 1917 up to 1947. It's worth mentioning that one of the main revolutions was in 1929, which was not surprising to say that it was a women revolution. More than 300 women established a women movement in Palestine, and there they were arguing about what they can do and how they are going to network with other women organizations in the Middle East, like Syria, Iraq, Egypt, and other countries. In October 29, more than 100 cars owned by women and driven by women trail all over Palestine. So imagine in 1929, a women movement who owns cars, who sent letters to the British mandate officer in Jerusalem, and they were repressed. Many women in the demonstrations were killed. I am not here focusing only on women in 100 years ago, but just to show that there was a civil society at that time, strong, mobilized, participating against the British mandate and against the idea of creating a Jewish state in Palestine. Unfortunately, these revolutions didn't achieve the statehood for Palestinians to have a state before 1948, even though that there was like a big mass strike in 1936. It lasted for 6 months, and we are talking about workers, unions, farmer unions, and the general strike hurted and make it costly for the British mandate before 1948. And the British mandate brutally ended this strike. And again, this also, if we want to compare, when you have no allies outside Palestine, and when the Zionist movement has allies from the West, America, the Britain, the British, the France, all of these countries were supporting the Zionist movement. That's why it limits the outcome of these revolutions during the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And the Zionist movement were also establishing their institutions in Tel Aviv, because it was not there. This Tel Aviv, the modern Tel Aviv, it was Palestinian land, open. The first building was in 1920 for the in Tel Aviv. So at that time, the Zionist movement started to recruit more Jewish Zionists to come to Palestine. The British mandate facilitated that. Also, with their influence in the governments abroad, they managed to push the United Nations to divide Palestine into two countries. A country for the Jewish people and one for the Palestinians in Palestine. So if you see the map of 1948 to June 1967, this is supposed to be Palestine in the gray yellow and Israel in the red. So they give the 5% when Israel was created in 1948. The Palestinians who were displaced and expelled from their land were around 750,000 Palestinians. more than the entire Zionists who came as immigrants to Palestine. So they displace people. This is why people define it as settler colonial project, because it is a kind of displacing and replacing the indigenous nation of Palestine. So in 1948, the United Nations divided Palestine into two countries, where Israel took 70, at that time in 1947, it was 54 for Israel and 45 for Palestine.
عمر trabajo. انت خاصة تستدري باش انت خاصة تستدري لانه اذا هو اسمه.
And then in 1948, Palestinians, of course, they refused this decision, which was 181 resolution from the United Nations to divide the country into two countries. Because how come you are going to take half of my country for those immigrants coming to Palestine? And then from 1940 to 1967, Israel was created. 750,000 Palestinians became refugees. And that's why you see Lebanon is full of refugees. Syria is full of refugees. Jordan, half population of Jordan are Palestinians, because they expelled them from their land and they pushed them away. And Gaza, for example, 75% of the Gaza people are refugees. And here in the city where I live, in Bethlehem, there are 3 big refugee camps. And these refugees, when they left with the hope to come back after a week, after a month, after a year, but it took them ages until they are waiting, and they are now living in houses in the refugee camps, from tents to shelters and then brick houses as they are living now. So now in 1967, Israel didn't stop to that point, and they occupied the West Bank, Gaza, part of Egypt, part of Syria, part of Jordan. So they took all, more than the historical Palestine. They occupied the entire country with parts of Syria and parts of Egypt, Sinai, and also from Jordan. So Israel occupied all of these, and then the United Nations condemned that, or there were a series of United Nations resolution and United Nations Security Council resolutions such as 242, 338, and many others, in order to stop, to have a ceasefire, to end this conflict. But Israel never stopped occupying the entire Palestine. So as you can see, the map is shrinking from yellow into blue. And Israel, when they occupied the West Bank and Gaza Strip, they start building settlements, colonies. And there are also a series of resolutions from the United Nations to condemn building in the settlements and the illegality of the settlements. For example, 2334 is one example of a resolution from the United Nations that condemns building settlements and occupying the land. So since 1967, Israel starts building settlements, and including East Jerusalem, and we are talking about approximately less than 1 million or approaching 1 million settlers living in the occupied West Bank, in front of 2.5 million Palestinians living in West Bank, and roughly 2 millions living in Gaza Strip. So settlers are increasing, And in theory, we believe in two-state solution, and where the two states will be at the end of the day if Israel continues its policies in the occupied territories. And lately in 2020, Trump came to put things on the table, and he announced that there will be two states. Palestinians will have a state, and as you can see, the map of 2020. This map is showing that the West Bank will be a Swiss cheese, islands in the ocean with no continuity on the ground. Just like settlements will stay in their place, and there will be tunnels, highways to connect the Palestinian small states in the West Bank. I think it will be like 13 isolated communities, and they will call it a Palestinian state. On the other hand, they will take that if which is to the east of the West Bank, and they will keep control of the Golan Heights, and they will take Jerusalem, and things will be impossible to have a Palestinian state. So let's say when Trump came and announced his plan, it means that they kill let's say the reference, the frame of the solution, which is two-state solution, and he forced some Arabs to normalize the relation with Israel, as we saw with the Arab Emirates and Bahrain. And this, of course, is done with the agreement of the big Arab states like Saudi Arabia and Egypt. If we go to the second slide to show what actually critical events that happened, as I mentioned some of them, like the Balfour Declaration in 1917, which gave a Jewish state for the Jewish people, and then the Palestinian revolutions, I mentioned 29, and the big general strike in 1936, the partition of Palestine in 1948, the Nakba, where in 1948, which is witnessed the uprooting of more than 750,000 Palestinians from Palestine. More than 500 villages were completely destroyed. And if we just look at the Nakba, and maybe it's good to mention that at the time where Palestinians expelled from their land, the Zionist movement, in cooperation with some Arab regimes, for example, Morocco, they sent more than 200,000 Jewish Moroccans to Palestine. And that's where the collaboration and cooperation between the Arab regimes, even before 1948, when they start to bomb the Arab capitals like Baghdad, Cairo, to force the Jewish Arab to leave Arab countries and to move to Palestine. 1964 is the creation of the PLO. Of course, this is also interesting to see that when they expelled Palestinians abroad, Palestinians start to form like military wings in order to liberate Palestine from outside. So they tried from Jordan in 1968, and they a little bit felt that they are able to do something, from Lebanon, and Lebanon carried a huge aggression from Israel as a result, because they incubate Palestinians. And the war the series of wars in Lebanon, because the Palestinians were there and they followed the Palestinians in the Arab countries. So in Lebanon, in 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon and they reached the Palestinian camps. And one of the famous massacres where Israel killed more than 3,500 Palestinians is called Sabra and Shatila massacre. When it was one of the biggest crimes that Israel did in Lebanon. And they killed children, women, everyone they killed at that time, with the collaboration with some Lebanese forces, groups. So the Palestinians were also expelled. The PLO leadership were expelled from Lebanon in 1982. They went to Algeria, to Tunisia, to Libya, to many countries. And that, in a way or another, bring Palestinians back to the question how to liberate Palestine. And after they were expelled from Lebanon, Palestinians bring the idea the liberation must come from inside Palestine. So we have to strengthen the civil society, we have to work to establish unions, we have to mobilize people, and the movement came in 1987. 1987 was the first intifada, which is a popular resistance, we call it, which is another term for nonviolent resistance, with a mass participation of Palestinians inside Palestine. So the first intifada started with a critical event when an Israeli settler killed 6 Palestinian workers in Gaza. And then demonstrations, protests spread all over the Palestine. It started in Gaza and then spread to the West Bank. And let's say this intifada, it brought hope to the Palestinians that after all what happened outside Palestine, that Israel expelled the Palestinian leadership from Lebanon, and they are scattered in 100 countries, there is a hope that there will be a kind of liberation from inside Palestine. So the intifada came and it gave hope to the people that we are able to liberate ourselves. And really we reached the disobedience and we were under strike. We closed shops, we organized protests with people everywhere. And for the first 2 years of the intifada, it was non-violent intifada. And it lasted until 1993. So it was a 6 years intifada, 6 years of mass protests and I would say bringing back the collective identity of the Palestinians after all what happened around Palestine, where Israel defeated the Arab countries, where Israel destroyed the Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon. So this intifada came, and I would say it forced Israel to come to the table of the negotiations with the Palestinians. And the first conference was held in Madrid in 1991, where Syria, Jordan, Palestine, Egypt came to that table under the United Nations umbrella. And of course, United States was playing the crucial role in this conference. And they agreed to follow the negotiations to end the Israeli occupation based on the United Nations resolution, based on two-state solution, and Then there was the secret channel of negotiations between the PLO and Israel, where in 1993 they signed Oslo Accords. So just to summarize here, that the first Intifada forced Israel to come to negotiations, which is the first time. And the first Intifada led to an agreement. Despite what is the agreement, but we were able to sit on the table. And that brings the power of nonviolent resistance. That shows and reflects that the victory and the process of nonviolent resistance is a kind of a shortest strategy towards liberation, because we tried armed struggle before 1948, in 1967, and there was a huge power asymmetry because of the support that Israel is receiving from Europe and from the US, so it was impossible. But the most important is that the people, as a bottom-up approach, managed to bring their powers together and to mobilize themselves to reach this mass participation for 6 years. However, the result of this mass intifada was not reaching the expectation of the people, which is to end the Israeli occupation. That's why Oslo was a temporary agreement that's supposed to last for 6 years until 1999, and then to end the Israeli occupation. But there were like mistakes, huge mistakes in this agreement that divided the West Bank into 3 areas. Area A, which is around 18% of the West Bank and Gaza, and which is under full Palestinian control. Area B, which is mixed, as civil in the hands of the civil treaties in the hands of the Palestinians. Security issue is in the Israeli hands. Where I live, for example, I am living in Area B now. So I asked for a license for my building from the Palestinian Authority, while the Israeli army are controlling the village. So it is around 30% of the West Bank, but 61% of the occupied territories left under full Israeli control. These 61, known as Area C, where house demolishing, forcible displacement, and controlling the resources of the people. It is the water, it is the agriculture, it's everything. So there will be no Palestinian state without Area C, because the resources are there, water, everything. And Area C, there are no more than 300,000 Palestinians living in Area C. And there are more than 800,000 settlers living in Area C. So they are very minority. And the Trump's plan came and lit the hands of Israel to annex 50% of Area C. So that's where the Oslo Agreement is a kind of giving the Israeli a kind of authority and to continue building the settlements in Area C, which is more than 60%. Now, if you remember, in 1999 and 2000, Bill Clinton at that time was pushing to reach an agreement, and there was a Palestinian use clause was no agreement on the final issue: borders, Jerusalem, refugees, and water. So it ended up by a visit to the Israeli Prime Minister, former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, who visited Al-Aqsa Mosque, and then the second Intifada started. The second Intifada lasted for 4 years, but it was not pure non-violent. Israel was killing tens of Palestinians per day, so Palestinians reacted by different means, such as armed resistance, and as a result of the second Intifada, Israel invaded Area A that I told you about, which is under full Palestinian control, and they reoccupied the entire Area A. And then Israel in 2002 started to build the segregation wall, which if you move to the second slide, Max, then we can see what kind of wall Israel is building. This is a kind of wall that Israel started to build in 2002 around the Palestinian towns. So this wall, as you can see how it separates and segregates the Palestinian homes. This part of the wall is built in the east part of Jerusalem. As you can see, how this wall will impact on the families and the social relations, on economy, on all the aspects of life of people. I mean, it's similar to Ireland and how it is separating families and so on. For example, in Bethlehem, you know, like Bethlehem and Jerusalem are twins for different reasons, socially, culturally, on the religion level, and they are now separated. So, for example, Jerusalem is 10 kilometers from where I live, but I cannot reach Jerusalem. Since 1995, I never been to Jerusalem, because it's not allowed. So with this wall also, they foster the fragmentation among Palestinians, the geographical fragmentation. And as a settler colonial project, they this wall represents the policy of geographical and political fragmentation of the Palestinians. So this wall, if Israel believes in building walls because they like living behind walls, the borders between Palestine and Israel, according to the United Nations, is around 400 kilometers. But what they are building is 850 kilometers, because the wall itself is going like cancer between the Palestinian towns, and to separate the land from the houses. For example, in our village, the wall is just at the entrance of the village. They took all the land and to the side of the settlement, and by day by day they control the movement of the people. They do not let people move, and they want to give them permissions in order to have access to their land, or to have access to Jerusalem, or to from place to another. So there are villages surrounded completely by the wall, and there is only a gate where you can come in and out. Yet this situation is not received by flowers by Palestinians. If you can just go to the next slide, Max. Yeah, so yeah, the Palestinians mobilized themselves. And thousands of people have been demonstrating against these violations. This is after the building of the wall. For example, partner, this image, for example, in 2016-17, Israel tried to prevent, to have a kind of electronic gate around the old city of Jerusalem.